We'll start with you doing this. Okay, we're in Tampa, Florida. Adam Taxin here with Rabbi Levi Rivkin of Chabad in Tampa, Florida. You're by the University of South Florida.
University of Tampa?
University of Tampa, I'm sorry.
Tampa.
They have a game against the Phillies on Thursday, I saw.
University of Tampa.
University of Tampa, yeah.
That's
I know
right.
they have an exhibition game, the Phillies' first one of the year in Clearwater. And we are at the Senior Center at the JCC here in Tampa Bay. Weinberg. So we have people who are here for a class, but Rabbi and I are going to talk specifically up here in about a minute or two, or however many minutes. So go on. We're talking about Exodus, Mishpatim, which is chapters 21 and 22 for the most part, this part of the week.
God also taught Moses the laws pertaining damages caused by a person's animals or property, including a pit that someone digs in the public domain. The Torah uses the verse "V'chiyiftach ishbar or ki yichre ishbar v'nafal sham ashar or chamar ba'al habar yishalem." If a person uncovers or digs a pit and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the one responsible for the pit must pay for the damage. The same law that applies to a pit.
It's not a school day, it's President's Day, so that's why we have children here today.
Applies to a raised, don't think that it's also a pit, but it's also to a raised barrier or other obstacles. A protruding hazard. Spiritually, a pit represents our ability to receive and to protrusion represents our and a protrusion represents our ability to give properly. Properly used abilities can be beneficial without proper supervision. However, they may cause damage. If we give and receive haphazardly, not paying heed to what or how much we are giving or receiving, or to whom we are giving, or from whom we are receiving, we will become a danger to society. But if we choose to accept only positive influences and spread only positivity throughout our surroundings, we will become a source of blessing to all around us. You want something to eat?
Again, it's President's Day. The kids do not have school today, so
Yes.
present some challenges. Should I set up right here?
Yeah, let's
okay.
set up over here.
Okay, now we're going to move. I'm going to join this, and we're going to talk about this week, which is in Exodus, I guess toward the middle of Exodus now, Parsha Mishpatim, and I'm going to ask the Rabbi. The Torah is divided into 7 sections each week. I didn't do any sort of video yesterday related to this. I try to do it during weekdays. So we're going to cover the first 2 of the 7 sections of Parsha Mishpatim. And Rabbi, can you just grab a seat so I make sure the lighting's okay?
Yes, I'm grabbing a seat right now.
This is with Rabbi Levi Rivkin. Okay, I got to adjust
Shalom.
it. Shalom. Okay, we're here in Tampa. Are we technically in Tampa here?
Yes, Tampa
Okay.
33625.
Okay, I believe you. I believe you. Okay, I'm going to join the picture, and I'm going to ask you some questions based on what I know. I have not reviewed this, but oops, I just hit this.
Let's not touch the table because then it will make noise in the video.
Okay, no, that was my fault. I know better than to do that. Okay, I'm joining the picture now. Okay, Adam Taxin here. This is Parsha Mishpatim, and the thing that immediately comes to mind for me about what's interesting is this: there are 613 commandments for Jews in the Torah. You get some sections where you may not even get one, especially in Genesis, I guess. Mm-hmm. Here, we have more commandments than any other section of the Torah. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, basically, this is the first week after the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai. And usually, when you need to start to give over how one should conduct themselves in life and through every situation in life, if you're 1 year old or you're starting out through the school system, you'll need to get every detail of how one should proceed in their stepping stones in life. And so Parshas Mishpatim is the first week after the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. And being so, we have so many more laws, I guess you could say, pertaining to the actual Parsha, and it teaches us how one should care for another person's property, how one should care for damages that are caused to another individual, and so on and so forth.
And that includes slaves. I noticed in the second reading of this week, I'm just going over it now.
Yes, property of a person is also, in those days, were slaves. A person would have a slave that would go ahead and do many different work for their owner, and in those days it was common to have a slave, and that's your property. So how do you deal with it? So if it was a Jewish slave, the Torah tells us that the Jewish slave has to make sure to put on his ear that heard that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai.
Is that this week, or is that a different part of the Torah?
No, that's this week.
Okay.
This week, the beginning of this week, it says that the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, and a Jew has to remember that who is he a servant to? He is a servant to God. And because he's a servant to God, he can't be a slave to another individual, to another master. It's important that another individual has the... Don't touch the table. It's important that another individual has the ability to serve Hashem, and if he's tied down to his master, telling him what to do and how to conduct himself, then he's sort of secondary to God. And the Torah says in the portion of Yisrael, it says that Nasa v'nishma, the Jewish people answer that they will do and they will hear to the commandments, but if they're serving something else, another master, then they lose out.
So slavery is very much, they admit it exists as part of the ancient world everywhere, but it's very much discouraged. Especially
Correct.
Because the Jews were slaves in Egypt.
Correct. Well, I think the way the Torah explains it is that an individual who caused damage to a person's property and he didn't have money to pay back, because he didn't have any money to pay back the damages, how should he then go ahead and fix his mistake? How does he pay it back? So the Torah tells us that he's able to then go ahead and become a slave to that person, to work off, so to say, the damage that he caused to that individual, and through that he's then able to go ahead and fix his damage that he caused to that individual. So that's a way that you could explain that. You'd like to grab a chair and join us?
Yeah. And then there's, I don't know if we can get him in the picture though.
All right, that's fine.
That's the guy.
You could still sit over here. Yeah.
The tort, so it's really the foundation for tort law, essentially here. And maybe you could explain to the audience how the Talmud is related particularly to this section of the Torah.
Well, every little nuance or every little detail in the Torah, say even the little vowels or the little sound, it's called a trup, the sound tune to the word, it says that there are tilit, I think the word is tilit, yes? That one can learn so many different lessons from even one letter, the way it is, how large it is, the way it is written in the Torah, that there's so much lessons an individual can learn from that. And being so, there's so much laws in this week's portion that Talmud dissects it, or you could say it chops it down to so many different levels that a student should be able to then really go through the details of each law. So if the Torah speaks about that you made a pit in the road and someone was riding by with his donkey and he fell into the pit, who's responsible to pay the damage? So the Torah says that the one who dug the pit is responsible to pay the damage. But it doesn't say there that if you have a tower and you don't have and somehow the individual falls off the tower and hurts himself or something else. There was you had a little stage and somehow from the little stage the individual hurt himself. So the Talmud then brings out that we learn from this word v'chi, or from the im, and from all the little details of the Torah's extra letter. It's not extra, but from that little line of that little letter that teaches us that this is what the Torah tells us.
This is Dr. Robert Norman, who's also in the picture, hopefully, if the camera's right. Is there something you wanted to add to
Well,
that?
this week's portion has a lot to do with doctors, because it says "Verapa Yerapa," that you should heal, and a responsibility of a doctor is that if they see someone that's in danger, and especially a life-threatening danger, they must stop and help and try and heal that individual. However, they also need to remember that it is God that gives them the power to heal.
I wanted to add one other thing that people may find interesting. There is something on the damages for, that might not be too heinous on the on video.
I'm sorry.
We were just trying to keep it PG rated
You know
here.
what? Why don't we bring in my father for a little bit, and then I'll watch the children.
Okay, come on in.
Rabbi Rivkin.
The senior Rabbi Rivkin, also of Tampa, is here via Philadelphia. I think you spent time at Strawberry Mansion, too, at some point?
I grew up in Strawberry Mansion.
Okay. Strawberry Mansion has changed a little in recent years, in recent decades. Okay. So we're going to go into, I'm just going to read this line. This is Exodus chapter 21, verse 22. If men shall fight and they shove a woman who is pregnant, and there is a miscarriage of her fetuses, but there was not a fatality, he shall certainly be penalized, as shall be assessed against him because of the husband of the woman, and he shall pay by order of judges. So they're talking about the value of a fetus.
A monetary value. A child is born, a child is a contributing person to society, to a family, to anything, and therefore there is that concept of having to pay remuneration.
Even
the
before the child is
damages that you caused even before the child is born. The whole idea is that a human being is something that is conceived from the time of conception, and once it enters into the latter stages of the pregnancy, it's a human being, and it is therefore a cause for damages if you, God forbid, harm that person. And I guess that ties in with the whole issue of abortion. It sort of indicates to us that there is a concept there of life even before the life is born. Dr. Norman was pointing out to one of the sentences in this portion, Mishpatim. Go ahead.
So we were talking about the physicians, and I wanted to just speak a little bit about this from a reading from Exodus from 21:119. God prefaced his explanation of the laws, Mishpatim, by saying that the Jewish people are required to set up a system of courts in order to try all cases of criminal, civil, ritual law. God then explained the laws pertaining to servants, marital obligations, murder, honoring parents, kidnapping, and compensation for injuries. That's quite a bit. So physical and spiritual physicians. If someone injured someone else, the injurer must pay for the injured party's complete cure. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Whenever we are ill, God requires us to seek the help of qualified physicians and follow all of their instructions. Likewise, God has empowered physicians to heal the sick. But whereas doctors are merely encouraged to heal whoever is sick, they are obligated to try to save someone's life when it is threatened. Just as there are both life-threatening and non-life-threatening bodily illnesses, so it is with spiritual illnesses. Spiritually, a person is in mortal danger when his condition has begun to affect his ability or desire to fulfill the Torah's commandments, since it is through our performance of the commandments that our spiritual vitality flows into us. The rules pertaining to a physical doctor also apply to a spiritual doctor, anyone who is capable of helping someone who is spiritually ill. When someone is suffering from a minor spiritual ailment, we are encouraged to offer spiritual assistance. But when someone is spiritually in mortal danger, his fulfillment of God's commandment is threatened, we are obligated to offer assistance, not allowing any other considerations to get in the way. And this is from the Daily Wisdom of Lubavitcher Rabbi.
And this all ties into the fact that the physical and the spiritual are intertwined. There's a famous statement by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe where he says that a small hole in the body is due to a hole in the spirit, in the spiritual. They're all intertwined. Illnesses come from a lack of spirituality or performance of the mitzvahs. And we are therefore required, it's interesting to note that the two letters that spell medicine in the Hebrew alphabet, which are Samach and Mem, are letters that don't seem to have a basis to hang in the air. When in the Ten Commandments, they were engraved through and through. So the Samach and the Mem indicate to us, which means in Hebrew medicine or drugs, that the cure comes from the miraculous, from God, ultimately. The doctor is the one that is the vehicle for it, and therefore is the one that has to fulfill the healing. But it's God that does the actual healing.
I want to bring something up. I'm going to only keep the broadcast on a couple more minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
But I realized in looking through this that today's Torah reading has probably the most misquoted or misunderstood part of the Torah. You know what I'm talking about.
Which one are you?
An eye for an eye.
Yes.
Ayin tachas ayin. People often take that to mean, if you damage someone's eyes, you got to get your eye poked out. That may well be the rule in Islam, but
the reality is that there is the written law, which we have here in front of us, known as Torah Shebiksav, the Torah that was written and given to Moses at Mount Sinai. And then there's the oral law, the Torah Shebal Peh, which then explains in many ways how to fulfill some of these sentences that seemingly you would say, well, should we poke out the other person's eye? The answer is no. You will give that person the value of that eye, of what it is that you damaged, and therefore are able to go ahead and compensate in that manner. The whole idea here is that we must remember that this portion always comes immediately right after the Ten Commandments, which were given in Jethro, or Yisro last week. This last Saturday when we read it, 2 days ago. And the reality is that the oral law, which is the Mishpatim in a sense, you could say these are all details of someone injured someone, there was a cow, there was an ox, a gourd, etc. These are already the practical applications of the spiritual laws into the actual physical environment where we are living. In other words, we as human beings were chosen to be God's caretakers in this Garden of Eden, which is the physical world known as Olam HaAsiyah, the world of action, of doing. And therefore actions speak louder than words, and that is very clearly stated in Ethics of Our Fathers. Leah Medrash Sheikar, it is not the study that is the most important, Elah HaMaaseh, the actions. And this portion in particular addresses itself to the actions of a Jew, a non-Jew. Every person, every human being is a descendant of Adam and Eve and has commandments that were given to them that they should fulfill to create a spiritual effect in the physical world. And therefore you have the commandments that apply to all nations of the world. Then you have the commandments that apply to the Jewish people, more commandments, and amongst the Jewish people, to if one is a king, one is a Kohen, one is a farmer.
In Israel.
In Israel or out of Israel even. These are all commandments that apply. The building of the temple, the third temple, God willing, will be rebuilt speedily, hopefully in our days, with the coming of Mashiach, right on Mount Moriah where the other two stood. And I'm sure we'll get the approval of the Knesset for it. And
any day now.
And I'm sure President Trump will definitely agree also.
Oh, for sure. And Keith Ellison will be helping build it, I think.
And Keith, I think, will be the cheerleading squad.
Of course.
Are you a Democrat, Adam?
No.
Are you a Republican?
Yeah.
You're a Republican.
Yeah.
What are you, Doc? You're a Democrat.
I'm a
You're one of these
lifelong, can't ever change
That's okay. I'm also
Michigan Democrat.
I've always been an old-fashioned Democrat. Like all of you here, you're old-fashioned Democrats. I don't know if we all fit in the mold of the modern Democratic Party today. I see the older
There's
generation
some heads shaking back there.
shaking their heads.
I don't
no.
have it on camera.
So we need to somehow get the new Democratic Party back to its roots as the old Democratic Party.
Wait, if you go back to its roots, that ties in with slavery here, because the Republican Party was
They did repent at that point. So we have to get them.
I had to work that in there.
We should definitely, without question, remind people that that there is this element of that it was the Republicans that helped get rid of slavery, not the Democrats.
Oh, they were built to get it. Whether that was the cause of the Civil War is another question, but we can say pretty confidently
Yes,
that the
we-
Republicans were the ones behind the
Right.
genocide of the Plains Indians. I think we can pretty much
Well,
confidently
there's
say
no
that.
question that there's been plenty of blame to go around for all nations of the world,
I'm saying that-
plenty of genocides, and unfortunately, we need to get more civilized.
Yeah, but that was after the Civil War when the Republicans had total power, and then they just went with the railroads, went right through, knocked out the Plains Indians at that point.
Well, listen, America was a colonialist
Yeah.
country. It was expanding. It's usually the weaker native populations are the ones that get affected.
I'm just saying that if we're going to blame the Democrats for slavery, and I'm a Republican, we probably have to blame the Republicans a little more for the genocide of the Indians.
I don't disagree. I'm not that familiar with that history.
Just trying to be fair, even though.
So, Robert, you're an old-fashioned Democrat?
Yes.
My ancestors were all in Poland at that point anyway.
Right. They
I
were
believe
being
in,
butchered there.
in making sure there's a basement. That's what I was always taught, Medicare, Medicaid. There's a basement so people don't fall through it. And the sort of derivation from the socialist sense was that we all had something, and that's where the old Jewish Democrats.
But it doesn't
came from.
include Obama phones, does it?
Obama.
Obama phones.
The Obama.
That's not in that foundation.
I don't know. They're still in
All right,
effect.
all right.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Hey, thanks.
And,
I guess I should wind down here. I got some things to do today. Thank
You're
you
all
for
set.
talking on live. Hopefully some people watched and will watch. More people watch later than watch live, especially
Right.
if it's still early in the morning. People are on the West
What
Coast.
time does
etc.
it air?
Oh, it's live on Facebook right now, but then I'm gonna upload it onto YouTube and then maybe make a few clips of things we thought. People like 2 to 3 minute clips, especially my mom. She yells at me when
This
things are
young
over.
doctor here is actually a Cohen. His real name is Katz. Which means Cohen said it.
That's right.
So that's why he's so involved in helping spiritual things happen. He's one of the main benefactors of Chabad. And God hooked him.
All right, so thank you for spending some time with
And
me.
he keeps on encouraging him, sometimes with a carrot and sometimes with a stick.
This is a nice contrast for you from the sunrise in Safety Harbor that I did earlier. But
You're welcome.
thank you, Rabbis Rivkin and Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, and sorry for the President's Day children interruption.
Oh, no, people
okay.
love to see
Okay.
children, you know, it's a
Are you reading
vibrant
further?
Jewish
Okay, you're
life
reading
here
further.
with children in there.